Hey guys, Zack here, and this is my review of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Okay, so this episode is actually the final episode, in that not only does it finally show like the ending of Part 5 and how Giorno finally ascends to the rank of boss, like he was been trying to do for the entire run of the series, but it also continues the flashback and explains how Rolling Stones work, and that's the name of the new stand we saw, the one that's Scopili's stand, and that's what he decided to call it. But in any case, the episode opens up with Mista confronting Scopili in the elevator, and he does attack Scopili when he thinks that Scopili is a threat, because obviously he just summoned his stand. His stand looks exactly like Bucciarati right now, and of course Mista's a little bit spooked. So of course he immediately confronts him and asks him if he has been following him and how he knows Bucciarati, and why he's been stalking him, and if he's a stand user, and a whole bunch of other questions. But and of course, Scopili doesn't really know how to respond to any of this, merely asking if Mista's a cop, but also then logics out that Mista couldn't be a cop because he wouldn't be in the apartment building waving a gun at him and going on a simple vendetta thing if he were actually there. But in any case, it's at this point where Mista actually winds up shooting Scopili through the hand, and then proceeds to tell him that he's going to be the one asking questions. And then proceeds to pin him to the wall of the elevator and presses the 7th-story elevator button, and then proceeds to go up to the top floor, where he then proceeds to start interrogating Scopili about who he is and what's going on. And also during this conversation, this Rolling Stones winds up disappearing, and Mista, and that's the first thing Mista notices when he notices that Rolling Stones has just disappeared from the elevator, even though it should be in there. And of course, it's at this point where he then proceeds to insist and start asking questions, and first and foremost, he asks him to call his stand. But of course, what we find out throughout the conversation, as Mista starts asking him questions and tries to figure out who he is, what we find out is that Scopili isn't part of any sort of organization. He's just a simple sculptor, not a particularly famous one, but a sculptor nonetheless. He does make enough of money to make a living off of it, and throughout the conversation, we find out that apparently he doesn't know what a stand is. He just knows that he's had Rolling Stone since he was little, and at one point asking Mista if that's the same for him as well. But Mista then threatens him with more violence if he doesn't stop asking questions, and of course Scopili continues to explain things to Mista. And of course also he asks to see Bucciarati, but Mista points out that Bucciarati should be nowhere near the building, which we know isn't true because we saw then in the previous episode that Bucciarati is there. But of course he tells him to quit asking games and ask him why he was, and then proceeds to ask him why he was following him and how he knows about Bucciarati. And of course this is this point where Scopili then proceeds to reveal how his Rolling Stones actually works in response to Mista's question. According to him, he wasn't actually following Mista. And also then proceeds to explain how he doesn't really know Bucciarati personally. He then proceeds to go on to explain that he doesn't know Bucciarati, but concludes that that's most likely the man that's been sculpted into his Rolling Stones. And also then proceeds to point out that how his Rolling Stones actually works. He then proceeds to go on to explain how he can't really control it or really know where it goes, implying that's an automatic stand that just goes off wherever it wants. And in truth, automatic stands, they're probably one of the more terrifying things because they very much feel like horror monsters a little bit. And Rolling Stones definitely gives that vibe off in the episodes that it's in. But he then proceeds to start quoting Michelangelo here, where he to use as an explanation for how his Rolling Stones works. And of course he then proceeds to point out, to quote Michelangelo, he doesn't really so much create the sculpture. He creates nothing. I don't know the actual quote, but the quote goes somewhere along that lines, where he doesn't actually try to create anything new. He just sees the sculpture within the rock, and it's the sculptor's job to bring it out. And also explains that and also uses the same quote continues the quote to explain that that the sculpture is just what the rock is fated to be. And then proceeds to explain that that's what his Rolling Stones is. It shows he explains that his Rolling Stones is essentially a fate-based stand. He explains, and of course, Mista is very confused, is still very confused throughout all of this, and also a little angry because he thinks Scopely is messing with him. He then proceeds to explain exactly how his stand works. He proceeds to explain how it has the ability to transform. It has the ability to become a statue of whoever it wants to be, of whoever it knows is fated to die, and then proceeds to try and kill them. And of course, Mista is a little annoyed about this because he obviously thinks that thinks Scopely is messing with him and points out that it shouldn't be anywhere near Bucciarati. But he also then proceeds to explain that it's most likely chasing after Bucciarati because he's fated to die soon. And also then proceeds to point out that of course the fate sculpted into Rolling Stones is most likely the fate of Bucciarati. And sure enough, it is. It depicts the aftermath of the fight of his initial fight with King Crimson, where King Crimson punches him through the abdomen and he dies. So yeah, it very much depicts that. It very much depicts that scenario where Bucciarati officially died. It wasn't revealed at the time, but he does officially die there and is essentially a walking corpse from that episode onward. But he also, and of course, Mista is very confused and also insists to know what happened to the florist's daughter. It's at this point where Scopely actually reveals that he didn't kill the florist's daughter, even though the florist thinks otherwise. As he goes on to explain, because the reason that the florist walks with a cane is because he has a degenerative disease that is affecting his internal organs and slowly limiting his ability to walk, and is slowly causing him to become sick. And apparently his daughter had realized she had the same disease as well because she saw it sculpted into Rolling Stones and decided to accept her fate so that he would have healthy organs to transplant into himself after she was gone. Essentially what is explained is that she realized what her fate was. She realized she was going to die a slow, painful death from this disease, and decided to kill herself while she was still healthy, while also dying in a way that preserved her organs so that they could easily be harvested and put into her father, so that he could continue to live a full, healthy life. Essentially, Scopely's explanation is that she used Rolling Stones to commit suicide, so that her father she could use her still healthy organs to recover from his own illness. So, which is cool, which is a cool and also kind of noble thing, which I kind of like that. But of course, Mista is ultimately very annoyed by all of this. Pointing out that obviously he feels like Scopely is still very much messing with him, and then proceeds to pull out his gun and proceeds to load his remaining bullets into it, and insist that Scopely retrieve his Rolling Stones so that it doesn't attack Bucciarati anymore. But of course Scopely refuses, pointing out that he can't. And of course, Mista then proceeds to fire several empty rounds before eventually shooting at the man himself. But then discovers that his gun misfires, and that number 5, and it's revealed that number 5 was the one who was responsible for actually loading it, and that's the Sex Pistols just essentially explain that it misfired and that it didn't fire off. And of course, Scopely explains that that's the reason why he's been so calm throughout the conversation. He knows that regardless of what Mista is going to do to him, he's not going to die during the conversation. As he explains, he kind of knows when he's going to die, when his number's up, because his Rolling Stones will actually reflect that. As he proceeds to explain, because Rolling Stones is a stance that shows someone how they're going to die, he knows he's not going to die anytime soon. So, yeah, for that reason, he's not really scared about Mista. But also then proceeds to explain how Mista can actually then proceeds to explain that Mista should be more worried about Bucciarati and what his fate has in store for him. And Mista just responds to that by knocking him out, and then proceeds to call Fugo to let him know about about the whole situation, about how he encounters Scalipi, about how Scalipi is a stand user, and that he and Bucciarati need to come and help him deal with it because he's not entirely sure how to work it out all on his own. But then Fugo then proceeds to tell him that that we know this, but Bucciarati is actually inside the apartment building, and this of course causes Mista to start panicking a little bit because he realizes now that that Scalipi is right and that Rolling Stones is in fact going after Bucciarati. So he tries to ask Fugo if he can have the extension for the phone that Bucciarati is currently using, but then it's revealed that actually Bucciarati left his phone in the car, and that's what Fugo is using to talk to Mista. And this, of course, causes Mista to panic a lot because he realizes now he has no way of getting in contact with Bucciarati and preventing Rolling Stones from killing him. So of course he immediately panics and fires several rounds from his gun to actually send up the Sex Pistols so he can figure out where Bucciarati is somewhere in the building, since obviously that's the only way he can think of to actually get in contact with Bucciarati and let him know what's going on. So at which point he then proceeds to run back into the elevator and proceeds to try and question Scalipi, but because Scalipi's been knocked out, he's having a hard time getting in contact with him. So he does plead with Scalipi to actually tell him how they're actually supposed to defeat Rolling Stones. At which point Scalipi does wake up just enough to reveal how they can actually defeat Rolling Stones, pointing out that while he admits it would be better for everybody involved if Bucciarati accepted the fate taken on his statue in Rolling Stones, and just let Rolling Stones kill him. He admits that if they actually break or change the shape of Rolling Stones in any way, that it might possibly change his fate and prevent Bucciarati from dying. So of course Mista then proceeds to look into doing exactly that, and it's at this point where the Sex Pistol contact him to letting him know that number one has actually found Bucciarati, revealing that he's actually on the 7th floor, which of course causes Mista to panic because he was literally just there, but he's now unable to actually get the elevator to open and is starting to panic a little bit because he's now descending a little bit trying to find Bucciarati, But of course, he then tells the Pistols to actually get into contact with Bucciarati. But it's revealed that that Sex Pistols number 1's bullet is actually nowhere within the trajectory to actually get into contact with Bucciarati. And what we find out is that Bucciarati is actually ascending the stairs. So Mista eventually gets the elevator open and immediately retreats from the stairs. But realizing that he's not going to be able to get to Bucciarati in time, he then fires several rounds through the elevator. And sure enough, right at that exact moment, Bucciarati then sees Rolling Stones and sees his image carved into it. And as he's about to reach out and touch it, the Sex Pistols then fire several rounds into it and knock it away from him. And of course Bucciarati is very confused because he has no idea what's going on. So the Sex Pistols then proceed to go on to explain what's going on to him. Essentially pointing out that Rolling Stones is a very dangerous stand and that he should be nowhere near it and should not touch it. But of course, they also celebrate a little bit, pointing out that they seem to have damaged it and have in fact seemed to have changed his fate. But then look at it, and then Rolling Stone starts leaking. Well, for lack of a better word, it starts beating like a heart and starts quote unquote leaking blood, which is just stone dust. But it does look like it's leaking blood, and the Sex Pistols comment on the fact that maybe they made it worse. And it's at this point where Rolling Stone starts jumping up the stairs to get to Bucciarati, and of course, Bucciarati summons Sticky Fingers to protect himself, but then the Sex Pistols tell him not to do that, pointing out and they warn him against doing that because if he touches it, obviously it's going to kill him. So for that reason, Bucciarati then proceeds to back off with Sticky Fingers, and it's at this point where Mista shows up and once again knocks away Rolling Stones with his bullets, but then proceeds to grab it so that he gets to keep it safe from Bucciarati, and since we know that Mista has touched it before and has been fine, it's fine for him to touch it, but of course it's at this point where Bucciarati then wonders what exactly is going on, and he then proceeds to explain that the stand is going to try and kill him and going to try and flatten him. So for that reason, he then points out that he should be nowhere near it. But then it's at this point where, in an effort to get away from Mista and toward Bucciarati, Rolling Stones starts phasing through the floor. It essentially just melts through the floor and disappears. And though Mista tries to claw at the floor to try and to grab it, he quickly realizes that he's not going to be able to get it out of the staircase, and starts looking around in a panic, pointing out that the stairs seem to have been compromised, and doesn't know where Rolling Stones is going to attack from, since it can easily, and knowing full well that this is what happened in the elevator earlier. He then proceeds to start panicking because he realizes now that the stank could appear from literally anywhere, and of course, Bucciarati is still left in the dark about what's going on, not fully understanding what's happening. But then Rolling Stones emerges from the ceiling, having apparently gone around through the staircase and up to the ceiling above Bucciarati, and is about ready to drop down on top of Bucciarati. And of course, Mista sees this and tells Bucciarati to run. And Bucciarati sees this and uses sticky fingers to go out the side of the building and cling to a zipper, which he then also uses to try and close on Rolling Stone so that it doesn't come after him. But Rolling Stones merely just reappears from the zipper and is just slowly chasing after Bucciarati. But of course, Bucciarati then panics because he realizes the stone is about to attack him. But it's at this moment where Mista, having apparently run up the rest of the way to the roof and jumped off, then grabs Rolling Stones. And though Bucciarati panics because obviously Mista just jumped off the roof, but Mista points out that as long as he breaks Rolling Stones, that Bucciarati will be safe. And sure enough, Rolling Stones tries to escape him at one point because obviously he's trying to avoid being smashed and is still trying to make a beeline for Bucciarati. But of course, Mista refuses to let go of it, telling him that's not getting away. And it's only when they get close enough to the ground where Rolling Stones is unable to escape that he finally lets go of it, and then lands on top of Fugo's car, who apparently had shown up to figure out what's going on. But and of course, and also as we find out, apparently Mista also left it behind the tape recorder, and Fugo came by to deliver that to him. So Mista winds up landing safely on top of Fugo's car, while Rolling Stones winds up being crushed into dust, which of course Mista does point out is actually a good thing, and does seem like Scalipi was right about two things. First and foremost, that breaking the stand seems to have stopped it from moving and projecting images, but also that because he wasn't fated to die, as depicted in Rolling Stones, he wound up being fine and wound up landing safely on top of Fugo's car. So he took full advantage of the fact that he isn't fated to die to protect Bucciarati by jumping off the roof, which worked. But in case Fugo then proceeds to climb out of the car, hands Mista the recorder, and then understandably asks what the hell just happened and what the hell's going on. And of course Bucciarati comes down asking the exact same question. But of course Mista actually doesn't really have a real good explanation. He's still trying to work out the best way to explain everything that's happened. But of course, also does tell Bucciarati that he did satisfy the florist's need for revenge, and that he did injure Scalipi enough that he'd have to go to a hospital for at least a month. So yeah, for that reason, Mista thinks that they've settled their whole situation, and then tells Bucciarati that if he wants, he'll look into the Leaky Eye Luca case, but Bucciarati merely points out that he'll look into it because he points out that it'll just take him a lot less time to do it than if Mista did it, and also then proceeds to tell Fugo to try and see if he can get a positive statement out of Mista to tell Fugo if he can get a positive statement out of Mista to see if they can actually find something to tell the florist. But of course, because Mista doesn't really know what's going on himself, and Fugo doubts if he'll ever be able to figure it out. But in any case, it's at this point where the trio of them walk off, and it's revealed that Scalipi has actually retreated to the window on the first-story floor. And what we find out is that actually breaking Rolling Stones did nothing. It not only depicts Bucciarati's face, but also the face of everybody who is fated to die in the actual story itself. So, in addition to Bucciarati's face, the dust from Rolling Stones also materializes to depict Abbacchio and Narancia. So, and of course, Scalipi does comment on the fact that he believes it ultimately would have been better if they hadn't broken the stone, and actually just accepted their fate. But then also points out that the fact that Mista was willing to quote unquote sacrifice himself to save his friend does point out that it seems like Mista has a lot more resolve than he initially gave him credit for, and also does call them sleeping slaves, and does point out that although they're all slaves to fate, he does point out that maybe with these individuals working together, he points out that maybe they'll help be able to bring somebody else's dream and fate to life, and of course that we know that's exactly what happens, but. In the present day, but he does comment on the fact that he does feel like the fate is in good hands if these three are actually in charge. But in any case, it then cuts back to the present day, where of course immediately after Giorno had picked up the arrow, Mista tells him to quit lollygagging and quit standing around, pointing out that they're not going to be able to heal Bucciarati's wounds if Giorno in particular is standing around. So. But Giorno, even though he knows better, does wind up following after him. But it's at this point where Trish actually winds up stubbing her toe on something, and she does point out that she must have tripped on something. But then of course Mista then turns around, then panics when he sees something that he believes is Rolling Stone. It's just a giant round spherical rock, but. He then looks around when Trish suddenly disappears and he has no idea where she went, and starts panicking. But and to this point where Giorno then points out that actually she's fine, and it's revealed that Coco Jumbo was actually hiding behind the rock, and then Trish then proceeds to speak out of it, pointing out that she just tripped on Coco Jumbo instead. But then it's revealed that the Coco Jumbo starts speaking, and and after spitting out Trish from Mr. President, it's revealed that actually Polnareff is still very much possessing Coco Jumbo. With the explanation being that since his body is dead and he has no real reason otherwise to just leave. He does point out that Coco Jumbo, that obviously he's just piggybacking off Coco Jumbo. He doesn't really have anywhere else to go, so he's decided to just hang out there as a ghost. And of course everybody is satisfied by that. And also he explains that he can't leave Mr. President, but he points out that that's not really a problem and that he's more than happy to just use his spirits as an advisory thing. But in case with Mista satisfied about that explanation, he then proceeds to sniff Trish, which comes off as weird to her. But then he proceeds to go on to explain how actually he realized that she's right and that he does stink a little bit, and does wonder if he actually should start wearing cologne. But she then sniffs him and points out that he doesn't smell all that bad, although maybe she's just used to it. But and also points out that it feels a little bit nostalgic to her. But also then proceeds to point out that his fingers are a little bit weird. And then they share a laugh and then just wander off to the Coliseum and ask Giorno to hurry up and so that they can heal Bucciarati's wounds. But of course, and Polnareff then comments on that, but Giorno just stares him down, so he decides not to say anything. And then he sees that Giorno's holding the arrow and asks him what he's going to do with it. But he points out that it's a valuable tool to have, and that he's not going to destroy it, but rather he's going to keep it. And decides to give it to Polnareff for safekeeping, so that it can just stay inside Coco Jumbo. And then we then proceed to get a cut to the future where now Mista is now Giorno's right-hand man, and Giorno is now in charge of the organization, is now the new boss. And that's where the anime ends. But one thing I want to explain for the very end of the story is that and this is just really funny and hilarious, and it's a little bit of a side story thing, but I do want to explain it. Apparently, in one of the side stories for Golden Wind, apparently the reason Giorno was able to climb the ranks so quickly is that apparently because nobody has ever actually seen Diablo, it wound up working against him, and Giorno was able to just claim, actually, I've been the boss all along. And while it's debated as to whether or not anybody believed him in that, it also does proceed to point out that actually does make perfect sense. No, it's highly unlikely anybody believed him, but since they don't really have any proof otherwise, they decided to just go with it. And that's hilarious. And also, there's another side thing, since the anime also doesn't explain this, but it reveals that Trish is actually a pop star, and she went off to go do pop star things, and proceeds to explain in yet another side story that it's because she took a leave of absence because of the things that her father had done. But in any case, yeah, that's gonna do it for Golden Wind. So that's the final episode. I very much enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the whole mobster crime drama thing. Sleeping Slaves was a little bit weird, but it also does explain that apparently this Mista knew that Abacchio Narancia, or at least he knew that Bucciarati was fated to die all along. But I do like that. I like how it ends with Giorno going on to become the boss of Passion like he dreamed, and now we get to move on. And also it's interesting to note that apparently Giorno never really learned the truth about his father and how he's a bit of a bastard. Of course we know he's the son of Dio, and by extension Jonathan Joestar, because Dio used Jonathan's body to conceive him. But yeah, it's interesting to note that he never once learns about his father's true identity, and I am curious if he ever finds that out. That's one of the things that the story never brings up, but I am interested to see how that goes. But in any case, that's gonna do it for my review of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. What did you guys think? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord server, link in the description. Thank you. In any case, thank you guys so much for watching. The next video I'm gonna be finishing Sonic X. I'm going to be finishing that because I've been slacking off on that. I want to finish it, but yeah, that's going to be the next thing I'm going to be working on, because Stone Ocean not fully out yet. It's probably not going to be fully out yet for a while, because Netflix kind of sucks. Although they are working on changing how they're doing episodes from now on, which I'm excited about, because they're actually doing the whole weekly thing instead of just, throwing it up all at once and just not really extending out the lifetime of the shows, which I appreciate. I very much appreciate that they're doing that. But yeah, in any case, just thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to check out my Discord. I tried to be active on there, but if anybody wants to join my community, link is down in the description. Be sure to go check out my Twitch. I stream every Sunday. I'm going to try and stream more at some point in the near future, but yeah, I'm going to be streaming every Sunday. Just keep an eye on that. Be sure to go check out my Patreon down in the description below. I mostly use that to fund projects, so go check that out. And finally, if you want to see more content from me, then be sure to check out the videos linked in the end screen. The top video is the most recent video. It may or may not be this one. Whereas the bottom video is the video recommended to you based on what you've already seen from me. So if you want to try something new or see more of what you like, then be sure to check both of those videos out. But in any case, thank you guys so much for watching. And until next time, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace!